Okay, so I thought I'd just jump right into this one on the journey of the Enzo redesign. This time I thought I'd switch it up and tackle the rear end of the car. This is something that I haven't really done on my channel. If you recall, just a very brief recap. I'm not going to go through everything. You can watch my previous videos on this kind of long journey, which is not even complete yet. I essentially started with a quick redesign of the Enzo, and this was my first sketch. And then I kind of landed here on my last video. You can kind of see the transformation is pretty dramatic from where I started and where we are. And that's kind of basically because initially I criticized the car thinking that, or stating that the front overhang, the nose was too long. There's a little bit of a dead space on that pillar back here. And then something's off with the rear of the car after the cabin, whether it's because the cabin ends far forward of the rear axle, or because the rear fender is a little too low, or the lights are sticking out, or there's no spoiler. Something is off, and that's what I tried to tackle, and we essentially landed here. That's the gist of it, although it's a lot more complicated than that, and you can kind of check out my previous videos with regards to the details. So basically I was very satisfied with this, and the way I got to here was kind of by looking at the angle of the car from different perspectives, mainly the front of the car, and redesigning it in so many ways where I thought like what I wanted to capture of it was the essence of the Formula One nose, how I wanted to augment it, doing many sketches like this. And so I realized that worked in improving the design from this, which is essentially like a JDM looking subcompact sports car. Nothing against JDM, but again, this doesn't look like a supercar or a hypercar. And then we kind of led to this, which is a little bit cleaner lines, and this iteration does just scream supercar. And I think to me this is actually an improvement on the Enzo, which is this. I mean, in my opinion, but I think this is definitely on par, and obviously it's subjective, but if not better than this design. And it kind of tackles all those critiques I've had of the design, which was the long overhang nose, the pillar there, although none of these are visible from this angle, which is why I kind of like this angle. This is probably the most flattering angle of the Ferrari Enzo from the front, at least. So having kind of worked my way up to here, I thought I'd tackle the back, and what worked last time was essentially like looking at the front perspective and then doing sketches, which I've kind of done here, but for the back. The thing was, with the front, I kind of got that nailed in like a few sketches, whereas with the back I've been having a lot of trouble. Like if you can see here, there's a lot of sketches. The original one I haven't really sketched out, but this is the original one for reference. I did decide that I wanted to kind of, those three criticisms are still there. I wanted to have a larger rear bolsters or fenders, so you'd say. So whether they're taller or wider, that's what I wanted to incorporate in the design. I did want to incorporate a Ferrari F40 style rear spoiler in there. I just think that's classic, iconic Ferrari. You can see it in the F40, and in all the other high-end Ferraris, they have a spoiler. So I thought it was weird for the Enzo to have this mini little spoiler, which you can't even see from most angles. So that's why these have spoilers, but I did make minor tweaks. Again, they're not major changes to the car. I should probably put a white paper behind this so you can kind of, the previous screen doesn't impact the sketches. But essentially, I didn't want to change up the whole design because, I mean, I still want this to look like an Enzo. And so I was just dabbling with the size of the lights, the size of the exhaust, minor tweaks. You can tell they all look kind of very similar, but overall they're still different. Now, what I thought would be like the changes that I would make is, initially, one of the big criticisms I have of the back is this headlights, or sorry, the taillights that you see that stick out from the rear fenders. This is very early 2000s kind of trend. I don't know if it started with the Enzo, but it's kind of how like the R8 started, the Audi R8 started the LED accent light trend, and then you see it like everywhere after, I believe, what, 2008 or 2007 when it came out. I forget what year the Audi R8 came out, but I feel like maybe the Enzo actually started the taillights sticking out, even the headlights later on sticking out trend. And to me, it doesn't really, it was like a change for the sake of a change, in my opinion. I'm not sure if it really looks a lot better than if they were incorporated into the fender, as opposed to partially sticking out. To me, if you look at it from like the side view, it does look like maybe the fender's eroded a little bit and the taillights are sticking out. You can see the taillights are sticking out, and it almost, from that angle, and if you're not looking at it in detail, it looks like the taillights are the spoiler, which they're not. They're just sticking out. And it also, if you look at the taillights, to me, it gives the impression of like, it's a bit of a crazy analysis, but it almost looks like teeth with eroded gums. Like, the fender looks eroded. It feels like it should have come higher, or at least covering the lights. And then B, it looks like the taillights just remind me of like gums that have receded, and you can see the root of the teeth. It's a weird analogy, but that's the impression. Again, that's definitely not a pleasant thing. So I thought then the only way I could change it is by incorporating the spoiler over the lights. You can see that it kind of encloses the lights even though they're still sticking out. If you had a big fender over here, sorry, a spoiler over here, a rear wing, even though the lights are exposed, it might look like they're still kind of encapsulated inside the car. And I kind of thought I'd keep that design the same, but removing that eroded fender or that receding gum look that it has. So that's why the changes you see here don't look too dramatic. Now, I did kind of try dabbling with like square lights here or rectangular lights. Kind of, you see the placement of the lights going above the fender. Sometimes I put them in the fender, and then I kind of dabbled a little bit with the exhaust and stuff. And I did many iterations, but the problem is I didn't land on anything I really like. The other thing I noticed that I kind of did like was I did widen the fenders. I did like increase the height, and I also added this kind of crease in between the fenders. Now, the crease lines differ depending on which design you look. Essentially, I did put this crease because I wanted to look like essentially a Formula One car, where these would mimic like the whole chunky, wide Michelin wheels or Pirelli wheels, depending on the era of the Formula One car that you kind of see here. So, but again, even then, like all these sketches I did, they didn't like amount to anything that I'm like, yeah, this is the one. Whereas when I did this style of drawing for the front, I landed on it. It worked very well after like the 5th or 6th, maybe 7th try. Whereas here, I keep drawing it, it doesn't land on anything. So I thought, again, I would like go ahead and do another sketch, a quick sketch of what I thought the car would look like from the side. Here I'll do like a bigger version. Essentially what I've been doing is just kind of making a rectangle, and I'll make it a little bit big so you guys can see. But again, this is a very, very rough sketch. That's how I've been doing like many of them, because I just want to come to like an overall shape. So essentially the car is like rectangular. Now what I want to do is, maybe I'll do two. One would be the original one, roughly. And then the other one will be like the changes that I've kind of made to it. So if you look at this roughly, the car is like that. You got this little space for a fender inside that kind of goes like that. And then you got these like taillights that stick out partially like that. And then here you have this bottom kind of reverse shape of this dip for the spoiler. But it goes in a little bit more, and it's kind of wide. It goes up. You have this little divot over here. This is supposed to mimic like the rear Formula One brake light, but essentially it comes out like that, and it goes like that. And then you got these little, I guess, rear diffusers, and then you got the tires kind of sticking out like something like that. And then also the top of the fender does stick out a little bit, but then essentially you got this cockpit that goes like that. You got the rear glass there, and you got this line that goes kind of, and it comes above the rear spoiler. This is your rear glass. You got like the engine and the cockpit inside there. So that's kind of like the stock shape of it, roughly speaking. Now, what I thought I would do is I would make this wider and essentially taller, or at least taller looking. So I'd start this line more towards the middle. I do think the idea of having like a little mini spoiler in the middle would be kind of good. So again, I'm bringing these lines a little bit more in as opposed to this one. Now we can play around with how much more in, how much wider we want the fenders to look, but I'll go with like a little bit more inwards. What I also do like is to match this line going in with the top, so the overall is kind of like the same width. Now what I would do is also I bring this a little higher. Now here it's a little bit low. I think on the actual car it probably goes up to here, but I would bring it even higher. So I'd be like, just so there's less dead space here. Now I know it's going to be filled with like the license plate cover and then like these regulation reflectors, because they don't seem like they're part of the design, but essentially it is going to be filled with some regulation stuff like license plates and reflectors, but I will still bring this up higher. And I know this is a very rough sketch, but the point is just it'll come together in a bit. So again, I'll make the top and the bottom roughly the same width, because I want this to look chunkier, wider, and already this does looks like it's giving a more aggressive stance. Now the other thing I thought of was, you see this little crease that comes in on both sides. I don't know if you can see it on camera. There's a crease here. I think I would accentuate that a little bit more. So there'd be a crease. I'll make it beveled in and make that follow essentially the spoiler. So you're gonna have the same mini spoiler here that you have here, with like, you got like the Ferrari prancing horse little logo here. I'll keep that. It's kind of nice touch. Pretend that's a horse. Now here, I followed this crease because you can't bend the actual side of the car in, because the wheels have to be completely vertical. You don't want to have a cambered wheel. It's not going to be, you don't want a stand style hypercar, because that's not going to be really like, it's not going to perform well. You're going to have your tires worn off. So anyways, it's going to look, these are going to be, maybe you could have chunkier, wider tires at the bottom. This will be like the tires roughly, although you can't see it here, it's kind of dark, but this is kind of the look I would go for. I would still have the diffuser lines there. I'll still keep this mesh looking thing that's kind of supposed to emulate the rear brake light of a Formula 1 car. But here, I will still keep the lights kind of in line with the Enzo theme. I'll keep them, but I'll make them maybe a little bit bigger, because like I said, the theory is they're going to be encapsulated into the fender. So this is going to be like the Ferrari F40 style spoiler. So even though they're exposed, the point is that it's going to be, there's going to be a fender, or sorry, a spoiler rear wing right on top of it. And that's going to give it like an enclosed feel. So then I'm going to draw the same cockpit essentially. What I thought is I could even make these wider, and then the cockpit's going to kind of come like that. And then what I'll do is make a little dip in the glass here to kind of give it that, it's a very subtle dip, but it'll give it that monocoque look of a Formula 1 car, but it'll be essentially a two-seater, right? So I don't know if it'll show on the camera, but there'll be a little dip here in the glass to emphasize the two seats and whatnot. Here again, I wasn't sure with all these previous sketches like what I would go with, what kind of exhaust, but I do kind of like the look of the twin exhaust, keeping them kind of mimicking the tail lights. But so I'll just put them there. I don't like them encapsulated in this oval shape, but this is essentially what it's going to look like. And then what I thought I would do is like maybe put a little crease kind of right there to kind of emulate, again, the chunky look of the Formula 1 tires. Now it does matter how you want to angle this light. If this line or crease, maybe making them vertical like this. Like I said, this is an erasable pen, so just for reference, I'll show you. what just the single angle of a line would do, like this versus this shape. This eraser is better, so I'll use this eraser here. But if you can see, just that one little difference kind of makes an impact. I'm not sure which one I like better, but again, that's why I've been doing all these mini iterations. Now, to anyone who's not like obsessive or a perfectionist like I try to be, despite this rough sketch, you might be like, there's no difference to me at all. But to me, I kind of see a difference in having that crease. Some people might even not like this crease, but to me, it emphasizes these chunkiness of the rear, like Michelin style tires on this car, on the Formula One car. Now I have another example here, but essentially it's the same thing. Like from the back, you would see just chunky square or rectangular tires from the back of the Formula One car. And so I'm kind of trying to emulate that on the Enzo redesign by essentially just kind of capping this off. Now again, it doesn't have to be exactly like looking like a Formula One car, but that is the overall theme of the Enzo. If you really study the design, for example, here, you can see how many things are borrowed from Formula One, like the nose of the car, even these little scoops over here. They do have these little fenders that emulate covering an open wheel racer, essentially. It's very similar that you wouldn't really notice at first glance. Not a lot of people see a top view of an Enzo, but it's there. So I think this would look overall, in my opinion, I did only a few changes. Again, the design is essentially the same. So I'm gonna put this back in the frame. I'll just put the oval exhaust in there. So to me, I think already this looks a little bit more aggressive. Now, like I said, I have dabbled with maybe rectangular or kind of like square lights, like twin lights like this on each side, and maybe putting them in. This would be a nice transition because the reason I got this from is kind of being in theme with the front of the car. The lights of the front of the car are kind of rectangular like this. I thought this would be in line. If I am going to change the lights and stray from the iconic dual taillight design of the Ferraris, probably since the Ferrari inception, I thought I'd have to keep it at least in line with something else that's Ferrari. So maybe with the front of the car, it would at least be in line with it. Now, again, because this is erasable, I can actually try to do it, but maybe we'll just do it on this side. We'll put them in the car. Now, this would be a good transition point for later Ferraris because you see nowadays, I don't know which Ferrari it is, if it's the Pur Sangue or whatnot, they have lights that look like this. They're twin tail lights that look like this. And so they've kind of strayed from the circular tail lights to this now. And I feel like if the Enzo had this, it would be in line with slowly transitioning to these modern lights. But I don't even like these, to be honest, on the new Ferraris. But if I were to judge this car, I can't tell if this looks better and if it's just a change for the sake of a change. It's hard to see because you're never going to look at the front of the car and the back of the car at the same time. So it's hard to see that, oh, this is actually being in line with the front design of the headlights. So it might just be like one of those things where only the designer would know, or you'd only understand after like third or fourth glance of the car. But again, and to me, this doesn't just shout out, yeah, this is exactly the right way to go. It doesn't do that to me. And so I think I would revert back to this taillight design. And it's kind of like consistent with, I mean, I don't know. You can leave it in the comments of what you think. I'm not sure. But again, the whole point of this video is that I've tried this type of sketching the rear end of the car to kind of get a better idea of what it would look like. And it hasn't resulted in a aha moment or a eureka moment like I did with the front, which led me to design like what I showed you, the progress so far. Anyway, so that's the progress so far. I do think these subtle changes so far are better. They do look more aggressive in nature, which was my initial criticism. Like, I do think widening this fender, making it a little bit taller, and and then I guess adding the spoiler, it does look more exotic and a hypercar, but I'm not really satisfied. And I thought, like, in order to, I guess, make more progress, I gotta look at how the car looks from the front. So what I'll do is I'll essentially do another sketch of the top view, because I think this gives a really good clue of how the car is supposed to look. So might as well just get to it. And by the way, I'll have this design that we kind of got to in reference, because this is going to be the design. I'm going to be continuing with this theme, but from the top, because I don't exactly see the back here. It's not really finished. So what I think I'll do is, again, this is going to be very rough, but what I like to continue is the Formula One shape of the car is essentially what I'm going with. So if you can tell, this is going to be, again, a very, very rough sketch. So maybe I'll just bring this in the center. And I think essentially what the Formula One car has, you got the little cockpit here, and obviously it's a single seater, but it's like an oval shape like this. You got the nose of the car going out kind of like that. Now this is kind of the reference between these three. So this is kind of like the middle ground. This is the essentially where I'm landing on, and roughly I'm drawing the top view of this with reference to Formula One car. So essentially you got a narrow nose that I kept. I'll probably put that here. The narrow nose of the car, and essentially what the Formula One car has, it's like an open wheel race car, right? But it's a two-seater. That's why this is wider than this, although you can argue this is the width of the car minus a little bit, because here you're gonna have like two seats somewhere here, right? And it's going to be the engine in the back, so it's a mid-engine car. But what I've done is essentially kind of wrap this car here with a bumper, and then you see it's got front wing or front spoiler incorporated into the design. So this is going to be like kind of an area where air would flow out for aerodynamics from the bottom. And even though this is kind of covered with, you got like essentially the lights here, this is kind of the top view of the car. Again, very rough, but I feel like this is going to help me decide how the back will look. And so you got the fender here. Maybe obviously the body of the car would have to be wider, so it would come out wider. And you got the fender kind of outside of the body, kind of like you see here. The fender comes out, the body is in. Essentially this is what I'm drawing here. You got the nose, the oval cockpit, and then you also got the ducts in the back. So there's going to be like ducts or venting somewhere in the back to emulate the front, right? You got these four ducts or scoops there. And so what I'd like to do, and then the back of the car, you have some big scoop over here. What I wanted to do was emphasize a bigger scoop. So it would I'd probably make it like, see, this scoop comes out pretty front towards the front of the car. I bring it out a little further back to make it an aggressive look. So it looks something like that. And then somehow it'd be tied into the back like this. Again, this is a very rough shape of what I want the car to look like. But, and then maybe there would be just like, the floor would somehow, there'd be a floor right there. Basically this dip here, I would have the body maybe extended, there'd be a lip, kind of like a side step, or this is essentially, yeah, you wouldn't see it from here, but you can kind of see the body of the car going there, and then this dip inside, I'd probably maybe cover it with, I'd extend the floor of the car. Essentially it looks something like that. Now this looks a little bit trapezoid or not square. I would make it square. Obviously this is a very rough sketch, but again, carrying that out to the back, you'd have this little dip that you can't see where there's the mini spoiler. This is the other thing I was going to say. Where I decided to keep the spoiler, the original Enzo spoiler, and then put a wing on top of it. I thought that actually is good and consistent with the Formula One theme, because if you look at these Formula One cars, I don't know if you can tell from this angle, but they have many levels of spoilers on their rear wing. Almost all of them do. If not, they have 3 or 4. So it would be kind of cool to have 2 spoilers right on top of each other. It wouldn't make sense if you look at it from a traditional car perspective, but if you're trying to carry a Formula One theme, it would actually make it actually fall more in line. But again, so this is what I would do. I think this kind of makes me come up with the idea of like this design is in line with this top view. You would have a wing that covers it all essentially from here. So I do think this is the direction I'm going to go with in the back. Now, again, it doesn't seem like a perfect design because I do see some dead space here, whereas here it's minimized. But again, you're going to have a license plate here again. So that's going to kind of cover a lot of that dead space. Maybe these rectangular reflectors, they're going to be probably maybe posted somewhere here. Although that looks hideous and there's regulation, but I don't know. There's some sort of dead space here, but I don't even think it would look too bad. Again, this design doesn't speak out to me as much as the front design did, but I thought I'd tackle it. Now, maybe as I'm doing my daily sketches, something else will pop out and I'll make a video about that. But I did do a quick sketch. It was the other day where I kind of thought about this and I kind of sketched it out very roughly. This was just a couple days ago and I made notes of it. Again, I always start out with a very rough sketch and then I try to clean it up later. I find that that works for me because it's more like getting the ideas out and then fine-tuning it. But at this point, this was a few days ago, I still didn't know what I was going to do with the I guess the body of the car, where the lines are going to come together. That's why it was very rough, but I think this kind of ties it in for me, this design. So I will maybe in the next video do another version of this and kind of have these vents come further in, maybe a little bit further back, stick out more. But this is the direction that I'm heading on this Enzo redesign journey. It's been a very long and challenging journey, I'll admit, because there's so much of a Formula One car theme involved into it. But again, that's what kind of makes it fun and challenging, and kind of that's the whole theme of redesigning. So anyways, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. Could be going in the wrong direction, but I think it's actually coming together, especially after so many weeks of spending time on this particular car. So yeah, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.